Welcome to recycling clay intro techniques, and this is recycling dry clay. So I never have bone dry clay, so I had to cut a block off and let it dry for like 4 or 5 days. And now it is completely bone dry, rock hard. If I were to add water to it, it would change color. So we're gonna work today on how to recycle a large amount of bone dry clay. So first thing you're going to need is a garbage bag. If you have a large beach towel, that works better. I don't have one here in my studio, so I have a couple of shop towels and an old t-shirt, and you're going to need a large mixing bowl. If it's a cheap plastic one, it will probably crack and break. So make sure it's a sturdy bowl. It can be plastic, it just needs to be sturdy. This one's metal, glass works, ceramic of course works. You just need somewhere to work the clay. You'll need a container of water. This is a food container that I just cleaned, and I just have a bunch of water in it. You will also need either a hammer or something that's heavy that can smash the clay. I will be using a very heavy rolling pin. I don't actually have a hammer here in the studio, but I do have this heavy rolling pin. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we're not doing this process over a carpeted area. It's best to do this outside on concrete. If you don't have access to that, doing it over tile might be better. Don't do it on a hardwood floor. You'll dent and break the floor. If you have, everybody should be able to just go outside onto a public sidewalk and be able to do this. It doesn't take that long. So the first step is to prepare to make sure that we're not going to make a huge mess. So I'm going to take my kitchen garbage bag and I'm going to lay it flat. I'm going to place my clay brick right in the center, and I'm going to fold this over. The next thing I'm going to do is put if you have a beach towel, again, that works better. I'm going to use this t-shirt, put it over the top, and then I'm going to fold it over. So now I have this t-shirt. That's going to kind of weigh it down and keep it from like poofing out, okay? So you're going to want to take your bowl with you, your water with you, and your smashing device. In this case, it's my rolling pin. Okay, I'm not going to work on my nice table here in the studio because I don't want to damage it. So I will be working on the concrete floor here in the studio. So I'm going to take my bundle, place it here on the floor, and I'm going to grab my rolling pin. This is when you want to wear your mask. Now, a lot of us have our own personal masks because of the COVID-19 pandemic. If you don't, you need to put some sort of face covering over your face because clay dust can come up and you do not want to breathe that. So I'm going to wear my everyday mask, and that's going to work. Okay. I'm going to take my rolling pin and start smashing. Now, these even sound like came out. The clay is nicely pulverized. I'm going to just quickly sift it. And I'm going to pour it into my bowl. When you shake the bowl, all of the tiny particles go to the bottom and the larger chunks come to the top. Okay. These larger chunks are going to be really hard to recycle, so we're going to have to smash them a little bit smaller. And there we are. That's much better, much easier to manage. Okay. I'm going to come back up to my table. So I'm still wearing my mask. So long as the clay is in dry powdered form, you need to wear your mask. Once it's wet and squishy, then you can take your mask off. But if the clay is dry and powdered, it can cause a breathing hazard to you. So keep your mask on until this is wet. I'm going to go ahead and add some water. Okay. Just going to get my hands in here and start squishing it up. And I noticed that immediately it's starting to feel more like clay and less like dry rocks. But that water soaked up pretty quickly. So I'm going to add some more. So we're just going to pick it up off the bottom, rotate it, squeeze it. We're just smashing and kneading and trying to rework all that moisture back into our clay. So now I don't have any more dry pieces, so I can take my mask off. I'm going to use this towel to help me so I don't get clay all over my mask. Okay. So now it's safe for me to use and operate without a mask on. It's still really dry, so I'm going to go ahead and add some more water and keep recycling and rehydrating this. Now, oh, here's a chunk that I did not break down good enough, and that's going to be really, really difficult to squish and knead. I'm actually going to set him aside because he's just going to hurt my hands. Okay. If you grab the clay like this, you're going to get little clay chunks underneath your nails, and it's going to hurt. Keep your fingers somewhat flat. So it's just your skin that's gripping the clay and not necessarily your nails, because that could be painful. Okay. And we're just about there. We're getting this really nicely worked. Okay. I still have a little bit of water left, but I'm not going to use it all. I'm going to take a small ball of my clay and just work with that small amount and see if I can't get it to go back into a little bit more of a nice consistency. So when we're working with recycling clay, we go in 3 stages. The first stage is somewhat liquidy, And I call that the slimy stage. Okay, so it's really slimy. And that's the stage I'm in now. The next stage, it's come together a little bit more. It's a little bit stickier. It's dense, and that's the sticky stage. So slimy, then sticky. And then after it leaves the sticky stage, and it no longer sticks to your fingers, but it's moldable, it's soft, it's kind of squishy, it's easy to work with, that's perfect. So it goes slimy, sticky, perfect. So this one's starting to leave the slimy stage, and it's working on the sticky stage. It just takes a little bit of energy and effort to get there. I'm going to pause with it right here in the sticky stage and just let it sit. I know that there are hard chunks in there, and they're still drinking up that moisture. So I'm going to let it sit in a ball. I'm going to grab another ball and work that ball. So this is messy, which is why I recommend you work outside or maybe in a bathroom where it's easy to sweep and mop, or a kitchen where it's easy to sweep and mop. Do not work with this over carpeted areas. That's a good way to get clay dust stuck in your carpet, and then you walk on your carpet and then the clay dust goes in your lungs, and then you don't feel good. Okay, so we're not going to work on this over carpeted area. Just over areas we can easily sponge or mop clean. And don't worry too much about the clay on your hands. As this dries up, it will start to come off on its own and can be reincorporated back into this clay. So we're still in the sticky phase. I'm going to set that ball aside. We're going to work on the next ball. The next ball of clay. I think I have maybe 2 left. This is a lot like making cookies at home. Kind of work that dough together. And it feels like it's got those chocolate chip chunks inside too. You can kind of feel the chunks of clay inside. If only they were double chocolate chip cookies. That would be delicious. Okay, so this is really slimy, which is why I didn't add all of the water that I had. This chunk we'll have to break up and do it separately. The other way to recycle clay in a large block like that is to leave it in a bowl of water overnight, and it will melt. It has to be bone dry, like completely dry. And it will melt inside that bowl of water and become completely liquid. You stir the liquid until it's all the same consistency, and then you have to leave the liquid out for a week or 2 until it dries up and becomes back to clay again. So that's the long way of doing it, but it requires less physical manipulation of the clay, so it's less labor. A lot of us ceramic artists will do it that way because we just have a recycling, rehydration rotation that we do with our clay. Once we fill a bucket of liquid clay from wheel throwing or hand building or extra slip or washing, we'll just make a slurry and set the slurry out on something that's really porous and let that slurry just dry up naturally and spend our labor time on something else. But if you are not a ceramic artist and you're just taking this introductory course, then you will probably need to get your clay moving a lot faster. So this is a really fast way to get your clay moving. So that's the sticky phase, and here's my last ball of clay. And you can actually feel the chunks in there. You can kind of squish them and they'll break up. There's a few chunks in this bowl I want to save and salvage. I don't want to lose any of my clay because I need all of it for my projects. Don't leave any big chunks behind. Okay, there's a chunk inside and I was able to break it up. You can actually see it's a little bit lighter on the inside. So that's still white, and the outside is starting to soak up that moisture. And that's good. We want those chunks to soak up that extra moisture, and that's going to keep it from staying slimy all the time. So we went from a super hard brick of clay to now we have 4 extremely soft, albeit chunky, balls and gatherings of clay. Okay, and that one's got a decent sized chunk in there, so I'm gonna just smush it in there. All right, I'm gonna start adding my different amounts of clay together, and I'm gonna start working these all together. See if I can get it to become one. And it's going to sticky now. It's starting to get sticky, which is what I want. It just takes a lot of hand mixing and movement. I'm trying not to put it on my table because the more I put it on my table, the more mess I have to clean up. So I'm trying to just work up here in the air and use my hands as best as I can to make this clay nice and consistent. I'm just ripping small pieces off and putting them somewhere else, and that's going to help me mix it. So now it's getting really more moldable. It's starting to get like tacky and not slimy sticky, and it's going to start pulling the clay off of my hands. So I'm going to use it to pull some of these chunks off of my fingers because it's a little uncomfortable. We're getting closer. I'm going to start my log making process because it will hold itself together enough. I'm going to make a log, fold the log in half, squish it together, make a log, fold the log in half, squish it together. We're just going to repeat this kneading process, and it's going to become very, very squishy. We're getting closer and closer to the consistency that we want. So it does take some time to recycle and rehydrate clay. Right now I've been at this for almost 18 minutes. That's not bad overall to go from a completely dry block of clay to something that's almost workable. And what's nice is all of those dry chunks that were left over inside are drinking up this extra moisture and helping me dry this out. I didn't even use all the water that I brought. I just used a little bit at a time. You don't want to use too much. You don't want to oversaturate because then you end up with a liquid slurry and you have to wait a long time for it to dry out before you can start making clay projects again. Okay, so now this is getting to be a little bit more consistent, and I can probably start the wedging process. And wedging is going to be really good for homogenizing the clay and getting air bubbles out, keeping it all the same texture. It's still kind of sticky. Let's see if I can break this up. That was good. Okay. Oh, my rolling pin, and that's why we don't do that. Okay, I'm going to use all these dry chunks that I have now to roll my clay in. I'm going to use those dry chunks to help me bring this piece back together. This piece of clay. So it takes a little bit of muscle power, but it's doable, it's workable. Okay, and it's starting to come together. Use a credit card to scrape up my table, try to get everything back in. This is the basics of clay recycling. We do this all the time. This is part of the normal process of working in ceramics. Clay recycling is pretty much how we operate. We would go broke if we threw away all the clay that got dry in our lives. It's just too expensive to keep replacing it. And it's perfectly good. You can keep clay in a dry state for hundreds of years. It doesn't go bad. It's not like it has an expiration date. It's not like a processed food. It just is earth, right? This came from the earth. Okay, so now this is pretty well worked. It's still a little sticky. I still have a few chunks inside of my clay that need time. So now I'm going to wrap this up in plastic and let it sit for 24 hours. And the next day when I go to get it, it should be perfect and nicely molded. So to wrap it up, this is the sealed end of that same garbage bag. I never put my clay inside a bag because there's too many opportunities for holes to dry out my clay because I don't want to do this all the time. So I put it on top of a garbage bag, and I'm going to take the end here and fold it up and over. It's kind of like making a burrito. I'm going to take this side and fold that over. I'm going to take this other side and fold that over. Now I have lots of layers. And I have this nice long tail here. I'm going to take this tail, pick it up, fold it over the top, wrap it around, and I have a perfectly ready to go tomorrow clay. Okay, it does need to sit for a while and kind of reconstitute itself and let all the water redistribute throughout everything. So I'm going to set that aside. To clean your hands, I'm just going to rub my hands together, and that's going to start creating these little clay pills, right? It's going to start pilling up. You don't want to put clay in your sinks at home if you can help it, because clay in the pipes can cause clogs. It'll clog your pipes. So the less you put in your sink, the better. So we're just going to do this. Roll our hands together, use the heat from our hands, which after working the clay like that, man, my hands are pretty toasty. Okay. And I've gotten a lot of the clay off of my hands and onto this tabletop. Okay. Pull all this together. Now you could do this before you wrap up your clay and take all of this clay you just got off of your hands. That's a sizable chunk, right? And add it to your big ball of clay here. Okay. So all of this was on my hands. Okay, and now my hands are a lot cleaner than they were. They don't have huge chunks of clay on them. And now I can go safely wash them in the sink without damaging the sink.